and welcome to another video. I'm Random, and today I'm going to be reading the fanfiction Alternate Perspectives from the Fallen Star series, written by Boxmaker. This is a Hermitcraft SMP fanfiction with a rating of mature, and the creator chose not to use any archive warnings, though personally I'd put in graphic depictions of violence for a few scenes. The category for this fic is General, and the featured characters are Etho-slab, Vintage Beef, BOO, DogM77, Good Times with Scar, Cubfan135, Iscal85, and other original characters. There are no romantic relationships, but the featured platonic relationships are Etho-slab and Vintage Beef, BOO, Etho-slab and Vintage Beef, Cubfan135, and Good Times with Scar. The additional tags are superpowers, alternate universe superheroes/superpowers, injury, blood and injury, hijinks and shenanigans, drinking, heist, hurt comfort, non-consensual body modification, Etho-centric, oops, I gave him trauma, kidnapping, medical torture, needles. Don't worry, he'll be mostly okay in the long run. These tags make it seem dark, but I promise this is lighthearted. The summary is in the description, and now on to the story. Chapter 3: Scar's Affair. Etho burst into the apartment much later than he intended to. There was music playing from down the hall, presumably Beef's room, which abruptly switched off. He flopped down on the couch and put his feet up on the table, pushing aside a few random knickknacks with his shoe. Beef poked his head into the living room. Hey, are you gonna be ready to go in like 5 minutes? Yeah, Etho muttered, eyes still shut. Are you alright? Etho opened his mouth to say no, but remembered that he planned on telling Beef what had happened. But he wasn't ready to have the conversation quite yet, though. I'm alright, I just had a rough day. Something bad happened and I think I'm losing my mind a bit. Beef gave him a concerned look. Is this something we should be dealing with right now? Etho shook his head. It can wait. Besides, I think a night out will help me clear my head. Beef nodded, and a few minutes later, they left. An entire section of the main road downtown had been blocked off so people could wander around freely between the various tents and attractions that had been laid out. At the end of the street stood the city hall, which was decked out in colorful banners and lights with a raised stage in front. It seemed like the entire city had shown up and people were milling about everywhere. The restaurants and stores that lined the side of the streets were packed, and the people lucky enough to have apartments overlooking the road had taken to sitting on the balconies, enjoying the festivities from above. When is the fireworks? Beef asked him. Dude, it's not even dark yet. We're gonna have to wait a while. It's after Scar's speech, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, but who cares about some boring mayoral speech? Come on, let's take a look around. Beef dragged Etho to various tents where they found clothes that were reasonably expensive and jewelry that was too cheap to be any good. Etho had enough of following Beef around, so he pulled him into the lane for funnel cake. You're not seriously getting some of that, are you? Beef asked him as they watched a kid pass by with a plate of fried dough covered in sugar that was almost too big for them to carry. It's good, we're at a fair, we have to get funnel cake. Your chest is going to explode if you eat that. Etho patted his shoulder and walked up to the small tent, placing a few crumpled bills on the counter. A few moments later, he returned to Beef, carrying what could only be described as a heart attack on a plate. They found a place to sit, and Etho didn't hesitate to take his mask off and place it to the side. He didn't want to get powdered sugar on it, and began to dig in. Beef's lips curled into an amused expression. Is it good? Hell yes. Best dinner ever. He handed Beef a piece, who reluctantly took a bite. It's decent. Etho spluttered. Decent? Decent? That's outrageous. You're eating heaven on a plate right there. Hell, more like. You're gonna make yourself sick. Etho finished off the last bit of funnel cake, licking his fingers clean. Nah, I needed my pre-ring toss snack. Let's go, I'm gonna crush you. They managed to find the ring toss tent with ease. It was on the same spot every year. On the way, he saw Pearl, who gave him a wave as they passed. He would have stopped to talk, but she looked busy with the camera in her hands, and he figured they could catch up later. Etho made Beef do the ring toss first, shelling out a few dollars for 5 rings. There were colored pegs, each marked with various point levels. Beef missed the first 2 shots, and Etho snickered and poked him in the arm. All that muscle, but no dexterity. Shame, shame. Shut it, you. Those were warm-up shots. The attendant at the stand failed to hide her laughter at their bickering. Beef managed to hit a 2-point peg on his next attempt, and then a more difficult 5-point peg for his 4th attempt. They both cheered at that, and Etho patted Beef's shoulder in excitement. 1 shot left, Beef. You know what you have to do. Beef nodded, a determined expression on his face. He flicked his wrist a few times, aiming for the furthest peg, marked with a bold 10. He planted his feet, lined up his shot, and let the flimsy plastic disc fly. Beef missed a peg by a solid few inches. Etho laughed. Your last shot, and you missed! Beef put his head in his hands in defeat. I whiffed, man, my last shot, and I freaking missed. 7 points, though, not too bad. Beef grinned at him. Let's see you do better, ladders. Etho smiled at the nickname, a product of previous shenanigans, and handed the girl at the counter more money in exchange for another 5 rings. Watch and learn, my friend. Watch and learn. Etho flipped the plastic disc over in his hands, testing the weight. With a flourish, he flicked it towards one of the pegs in the front, marked with a measly 2 points. It bounced off the edge of the peg, and Etho cursed. Who's whiffing now? Oh please, that was just my warm-up shot. Beef raised his hands in a mock surrender. Etho lined up for the next shot, feeling a bit more confident. He aimed too low the first time, so he tried again, aiming for the first peg. This time the disc hit the peg dead on. Beef gave him a polite clap. Confident now, Etho flipped the disc in his hand and sent it sailing towards the 5-point peg. It hit its mark perfectly, and he gave a loud whoop. All tied up, Beef? Getting nervous? No, it's getting windy, I think. Maybe you'll miss these next 2 shots. Such little faith you have, he replied, shaking his head in mock disappointment. I'm just getting started. For a moment, he debated his options. He had to beat Beef. A tie was out of the question, but he really wanted to go for the 10-point peg because he had never hit it before. He also really wanted to be able to brag to Beef about it. The next shot, he lined up to hit an easier 2-point peg to resolve the tie. His last shot could be an attempt at the 10-point peg. That was his plan until he missed the 2-point peg. He groaned and turned in a circle, giving Beef a pained expression as he went. Well, what will he do here? Beef pondered aloud. Will he swallow his pride and beat me by a shallow 2 points? Or will he see himself to his full potential? Beef was goading him. Etho knew this. It was also working. Etho adjusted his mask and pulled up his sleeves. He lined up the last shot, eyeing the 10-point peg at the heart of the tent. He flicked his wrist and sent the disc flying. It landed on the peg and they both cheered, jumping up and down, Beef patting Etho on the back. From the way they were acting, you would have thought they just won the lottery. 17 points, not too bad if I do say so myself. That's a new record for me. I swear, man, you train in secret just so you can crush me once a year. Etho gasped in mock horror. How dare you say such a thing? This is pure raw skill. With their combined 24 points, they won a lobster plushie, which was promptly named Snappers, and shoved it into Beef's bag, with its head poking out the top. With that, they set off towards the stage where a crowd had already gathered, ready to listen to the mayor's speech. Neither of them were all that invested in what Scar had to say, but figured it would be rude to show up to the fair and not even bother to listen. The crowd clapped politely as Scar wheeled himself up the ramp and onto the stage. Personally, Etho thought he looked a little bit silly in his red suit and top hat, but he somehow pulled the look off quite spectacularly. He carried himself with grace, and he was an excellent speaker. Not that Etho was paying much attention as Scar started speaking, because his eyes had flickered behind Scar to the unmistakable figure of B-Dubs, who cleaned up quite nicely in a suit. He tugged at Beef's sleeve. "Is that B-Dubs up there?" "Who?" Beef hissed back, leaning over to see past the crowd of people. "B-Dubs. He goes to our college. That's him up there." I don't know him, but I'll take your word for it. Maybe he got an internship or something?" "Maybe," Etho muttered back. He could have sworn B-Dubs was majoring in architecture, or maybe it was interior design. He wasn't sure, but either way, it was a bit peculiar that he was working for Scar. The job probably paid well, though. Scar droned on for a few minutes, then began to wrap up his speech. Etho was startled from his thoughts by an unmistakable German accent. "Hey, Beef." It was Doc, who had managed to work his way through the crowd over to them. It was just his luck that Beef managed to become friends with one of the few people Etho didn't like. He focused his attention back on Scar while Beef greeted Doc with a fist bump. Scar was wrapping up his speech, scanning the crowd. His gaze flickered over to Etho and he stopped dead in his tracks for a moment, voice trailing off. They locked eyes for a brief second and a shiver ran down Etho's spine. He swore Scar's eyes flashed with a blue light, just for a moment. And then Scar broke eye contact and continued his speech like nothing had happened. Incredibly unsettled, Etho rubbed his head, which was starting to hurt. He shivered, feeling a bit cold all of a sudden. Then the sudden motion reminded him of his arm, which was now throbbing again. Beef was talking animatedly with Doc and Ren, who Etho recognized as Doc's roommate. Beef was much closer with the both of them than he was. Etho turned, looking back up towards the stage. Both Scar and B-Dubs had vanished. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. This would really be a great time for his newly discovered out-of-body experience to happen so he could get a better view. Naturally, nothing happened. Etho didn't consider himself a particularly paranoid person, but he trusted his instinct. Right now, his head was screaming danger. He stood on his toes to see if he could catch a glimpse of Scar, but there was nothing. He had vanished completely. Etho remembered the piercing gaze of his cool, glowing eyes and took a step back. He tapped Beef on the shoulder, still watching the stage. "Beef, I think we should go." "Go? What do you mean go? Look, I know Doc annoys you, but he's not that bad." Doc snorted. "Look, he annoys everyone. That's just how he is," Ren agreed. "Don't take it personally, he's just a bit of a bitch." Doc immediately jumped to his own defense, but Etho couldn't find humor in the moment. "Come on, Beef, we have to water the plants," Etho said, pulling him away. That was their code phrase for, "It's time to leave immediately, no questions asked." Beef's eyes widened at the use of the emergency sentence, but he waved goodbye to Doc and Ren, who were still bickering, and let Etho lead him away. "What's up?" Beef asked as the two of them pushed through the crowd in the opposite direction of the stage. Etho pulled Beef into an abandoned side street, away from all the people. "Listen, the past 24 hours have been really, really strange, and this has been the cherry on top," he said, peering out of the alleyway. No one paid them much attention, and there was no sign of Scar or B-Dubs. "Does this have anything to do with the thing you told me about? The bad thing that happened to you?" "Sort of," Etho muttered, rubbing his head. "Look, this is gonna sound really strange, but Scar gave me a weird look. Like, I don't know, it was weird." Beef was giving him a skeptical look, but he was still listening. "He looked at you weird. That's not exactly cause for concern, though, is it?" I know. Etho pulled him further back into the alleyway, away from the crowd. He looked like he could see straight through me. Look, this probably doesn't make a lot of sense. Let's just go home and I'll tell you everything. Etho could tell Beef was still a bit skeptical about the whole situation, but he nodded, picking up on Etho's obvious distress. Alright then, you lead the way, Beef began, but as they turned around, they found their exit had been blocked by none other than Scar wheeling himself into the alleyway. Beef turned to Etho, who could see disbelief in his wide eyes. Any uncertainty he had about what Etho was saying earlier had completely dissolved. Etho surreptitiously took a step in front of Beef's broad frame in a poor attempt to protect him. Scar was dangerous. Etho could see that from a mile away. He was the mayor, which gave him political power, but it ran deeper than that. He was charming, a smooth talker judging by the refined speech he had just given. By the fancy suit and sharp jewelry, he was clearly well off. Powerful, rich, and charismatic, a dangerous concoction. Beef wrapped a hand around the top strap of Etho's bag like he was prepared to pull him down the alley at a moment's notice. He was within the reach of Etho's knife, which he always kept in the top pocket. "Hello, gentlemen," Scar announced, stopping a few paces from them. B-Dubs was nowhere to be seen. "Hello," Etho said calmly, heart thudding in his chest. It was probably best to be polite. He was talking to the mayor, after all. Fancy seeing you here," he offered, nudging Beef another step back. Scar gave him a wide grin. "Oh, what a happy coincidence. I just happened to be passing by. I saw you during my speech. You live around here, I assume?" Yeah, we live in an apartment near here. We go to the local college." The words stumbled out of Etho's mouth before he quite realized what was happening. Startled, he clamped his mouth shut. Scar was charming, but he wasn't that charming, was he? What was he thinking? He was smarter than that. Beef clearly had the same train of thought as he gave Etho a firm push on the back, almost like a warning. "What the hell do you want, man?" Beef asked, taking a step forward to stand next to Etho. Scar raised his hands placatingly. "Oh, I don't mean any harm, gentlemen. I just saw your friend here," he gestured towards Etho. "And I think he might just have the skills I require for a little job I have." Beef turned to Etho and gave him a confused look, but Etho refused to meet his eyes. His heart was pounding. Scar knew. But how? The look he had given him during the speech was piercing, but could he really tell that Etho possibly had powers, with just a glance? He wasn't sure if Scar was a beacon or not, but maybe being able to tell if other people had powers was part of his ability. "I'm not interested, thanks," he replied to Scar, whose face didn't react to the refusal. Scar nodded and wheeled himself a bit closer. Beef tensed next to him as Scar pulled out a small slip of paper from his suit pocket and held it aloft. Of course, but really, Etho, this isn't some deal you should just outright refuse. Think about it for a few days and give me a call when you're ready. Yes?" His smooth voice echoed through Etho's mind, and he found himself nodding along at the words as he plucked the business card from Scar's hand, ignoring Beef's mild protesting. He tucked it in his jacket pocket where it would be safe. Scar gave them a dashing grin and tipped his hat. "Very well then, I'll be seeing you soon." He left the same way he came and vanished around the corner of the alleyway. "What the fuck?" Beef half yelled, whipping around to face Etho. Etho wasn't sure of what to say. "Let's go home," he decided, because his head and shoulder hurt and he needed a long walk to digest that encounter. Beef shook his head as they headed out of the alleyway. There better be a reasonable explanation for all of this, he said gruffly. He wasn't angry per se, but Etho could tell he was on edge. There isn't, but I'll tell you everything I know. After that, they walked in silence, only broken by Beef asking questions. Etho cut him off each time, telling him they would talk at home. There was a presence with them, something unfamiliar, but each time Etho turned to look behind them, there was no one there. Just the uneven sidewalk littered with trash and the occasional potted plant. After a few minutes, he stopped bothering to check, chalking up the uncanny feeling and sound of footsteps to paranoia. Etho? Beef began, and Etho sighed inwardly. Another question that would have to wait until they were off the street. How did he know your name? And that was one question Etho couldn't answer, even when they arrived home. What will happen next? Who knows? Well, I know, because I read it. But that ring toss scene. I loved that ring toss scene. It took me so long to record it because I would just start laughing in the middle of it. I loved that scene. It was an amazing scene. It's them playing ring toss. It wasn't supposed to be that long. And villain Scar, well, not quite villain. He's not really evil, but right now he is so villain coded. He's just, I don't know why, but I love these charismatic evil characters. They always have me in a vice fucking grip. Anyways, I'm sure you don't want to hear me ramble. For those listening on YouTube, it is possible to download this fic on AO3. There's a link to that in the description. In the description, there's also credits for the fanfiction, because it wasn't written by me, the fanart, because it wasn't made by me, and a lot of the sound effects, because most of them aren't mine. A few of them are. Most of them aren't. Leave a comment. Tell me what you thought. I'd love to know how I could improve my videos. And yeah, that's it. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye bye.